Hi, second graders. Happy Tuesday. So on Friday, remember we had finished our Read Aloud the BFG. It was a really, I love the ending to the book. It's a great ending, but it was a little bit sad also to be finishing the BFG. Sometimes it's tough to finish a book that you really enjoy or that you've been reading for a while. So yesterday I was actually in our classroom. I was getting things kind of cleaned up and put away. So while I was there, I grabbed a few different books to read as read alouds. They aren't as long as the BFG, they're much shorter books. And I was thinking since there really isn't a whole lot of time left this school year, we really only about a month until we don't have any more, school assignments like this, and it will be summertime. I was thinking about how very soon you'll be third graders, and I just grabbed a few different books, chapter books that I found that we have in our classroom. Some of you may have even read them, that have to do with third grade or moving up to third grade. So I grabbed a few. These were two of the ones that I took that I thought maybe we would read. I was kind of looking for something maybe a little bit shorter and something maybe more about school or, like I said, going to third grade. So I thought I'd start with this one. This is a book that I've actually never read as a read aloud before until now. So it's called Swamp Monster in Third Grade. The title is Lizards in the Lunch Line. And I'm pretty sure this book belongs to a series, the Swamp Monster in Third Grade books, and this one is, like I said, Lizards in the Lunch Line. So as you look at the picture, you can tell this book is definitely, of course, fiction. The characters in it look like maybe, swamp monsters. They almost look like dragons, but we know they're swamp monsters from the title. But they're wearing clothes. This one here has a lunch tray. He's going through the lunch line. So it looks kind of like regular school, other than the fact that, of course, these aren't humans, they're swamp monsters. So I'll read the back to you. The back will give us some information about what this book will be about. So up at the top it says, it's slime time, double time. Jake has a secret. He can turn from a swamp monster into a kid, but he's not going to brag about it. Well, maybe just a little. In no time, Jake and his swamp monster cousin Dominic decide to lose their gills, say so long to their scales, and head to the third grade. Big mistake. As soon as they get there, Dominic teams up with the school bully. Together, they pick on Jake's friend and start the biggest food fight in school history. Oh boy. Jake wants nothing more than to take Dominic back to romp in the swamp, but Dominic isn't going anywhere, except maybe detention. It's starting to look like Jake will be stuck in the third grade forever. All right. So here's this first title page, Lizards in the Lunch Line. This is written by Debbie Daddy, illustrated by, or Dady maybe, I'm not sure. Illustrations by Margot Lucas. And this book is also, she also writes all of the Bailey School Kids, the adventures of the Bailey School Kids. We have a book bin in our classroom of all of those books. So this is the same author as the Bailey School Kids stories. This book is dedicated, it says, to my favorite little monsters, Nathan, Becky, and Alex, with special thanks to my wonderful editor, Maria Barbo. And this is the table of contents. So this tells all of the chapters and what page all of those chapters begin on. The first chapter is called Dominic, and we know that Dominic is one of the characters in the story. Dominic, I think on the back it said, is the cousin of Jake. So chapter 1 on page 1 is called Dominic. So that's what I'll read today. There might be some days, if the chapter's really short, that I may even read 2 chapters in one day. Kind of like the opposite of the BFG, where I would sometimes split up the chapters because some of those were so long. All right, so here's chapter 1 called Dominic. And of course, whenever there's a picture, I'll show you. You're lying, Dominic told Jake. The 2 cousins sat on a big rock deep inside a swamp. Dominic's hair stuck up in one long fin in the middle of his head, and Jake stood up in green points. But that wasn't the only difference between the two swamp monsters. Even though Dominic was the same age as Jake, he towered over his smaller cousin. Jake's face turned from green to red. He clenched his fists and splashed swamp water with his spiked tail. "I'm not lying," he shouted. "I really did spend the night in the webless creature's house, and I really did go to one of their schools." "Yeah, sure you did," Dominic said as he rolled his eyes. "And I ate dinner with King Neptune last night." "Nancy will tell you the truth," Jake said, pointing to where his younger sister was playing mud ball with some friends in the swamp water. "She saw me there." So here's a picture of them telling the story. So this is Jake, this is Dominic, I think, and this is the little sister Nancy. So Jake is saying that he spent the night at a webless creature's house. And he's saying, yes, it is true. Even ask my sister Nancy, who's back here. So as you can see, this looks a little bit different from the cover. Here they really are swamp monsters. They're not wearing people's clothes. They're not at school. They're just in the swamp, not looking like, more like real life over here. All right, so he said that Nancy saw him there. Jake put his webbed hands up to his mouth and yelled, "Nancy, come here and tell Dominic the truth." Nancy swam over and pulled her green body up onto the rock. She flung back her stringy blonde hair and asked, "What are you guys talking about?" "Jake's been lying to me about living with webless creatures." So if a creature is webless, it means they don't have a web. Think about that less suffix that we learned about. "He said he ate things called cheeseburgers that tasted better than crawfish." Nancy shrugged. "It's true," she said matter-of-factly. "Jake was really taken off by 4 webless creatures and even spent the night inside one of their houses." Jake nodded. "That was Tommy. He has these really strange white things you lay your head on to sleep. They're softer than swamp mud, but they're really dry." What would that be that us humans have? Strange white things you lay your head on to sleep. What would that be called? A pillow. I didn't know if I'd ever see Jake again," Nancy admitted. "I thought he might stay webless forever. He looked so weird without scales. It wasn't natural." Dominic rolled his green eyes and snorted in disbelief. "I got in big trouble for being gone from home for so long," Jake said. "This is the first time I've been allowed out of Mom's sight in 2 weeks." Dominic slumped back onto the moss-covered rock and flicked a piece of swamp weed over his bare green chest. "You're making this all up," he said. "Webless creatures aren't real. My dad told me so. And there is no way you turned into one." So a webless creature would be like people, like us. So Dominic is saying there's no way that his cousin Jake turned into a person and even spent the night in a person's house. He's saying that's not true. That doesn't exist. Nancy pushed her messy hair out of her eyes and frowned at her cousin. "You were the one who told us that your friend got put in a webless creature's zoo." Now it was time for Dominic to turn red. "I made that all up," he said softly. Nancy roared her loudest swamp monster yell. The waters of the swamp shivered as she poked Dominic in the stomach. "You mean you lied to us?" she fumed. Dominic snarled back. "Just like you're lying to me now?" "I don't have to listen to this," Nancy snapped, and dove headfirst into the murky swamp water. "We're not lying," Jake said. "Prove it," Dominic told him. Jake thought for a moment. "Okay, come on," he said. "Follow me." So that's the end of chapter 1. So Jake will prove to his cousin Dominic, that he really did go to a webless creature's house, which would be a person. And that is the title of chapter 2, Webless Creatures, which we'll read tomorrow. All right, I hope you enjoyed our new read aloud. All right, see you later.